Recently, I was doing a little bit of cleaning and reorganizing here in the studio, and I got to a point where I needed to build something specific to better organize. And I thought that a good solution for that particular problem was going to be a project that I did once when I was on the King of Random. So I'm going to do that same project with a little bit of variation tailored to this exact use. To start off, I'm going to be making a mold of my hand using something called Alginate. Now, what I'm using this for today, sure, I could come up with a different method, but this is a fun way to do it, and I think it'll look fun in the studio. I'm actually going to be making a mold and cast of my hand that will end up being a hook on the wall designed to hold up some of my personal protection equipment. If you've seen any of my videos where I'm making knives, you may have seen me wearing something with a helmet, face mask, and it's got a hose that runs down the back. That's a device made by 3M that provides filtered air up through a head mask and with positive pressure so that no dust gets in. It's great for not breathing in anything toxic. I don't have a good solution for where to put that when I'm not wearing it. It usually just sits on a table or a counter or something like it. We need a better spot, so I'm gonna make a hook for it, and I'm gonna make that hook shaped like my hand. So this right here is Alginate. That's what it's going to be used for our mold material. This stuff is actually derived from seaweed, and when you mix it with water, it sets into a sort of gelatinous substance that's really good for casting plaster inside it. This container right here is what I'm gonna be using to contain the mold as I mix it all up, and my hand fits just barely down into here. I measured out the water in one bucket and the powder in another bucket because this stuff reacts really quickly, and I don't want part of it to start reacting too soon as I'm still measuring it out. So I got all of the powder that I need in one bucket, and I'll just add that to the other one. I'm gonna mix it as gently as I can because I don't want to introduce air bubbles. I will mix, I'll pour everything from one bucket into this, and I'll put my hand in the pose I'm going for. So I'm gonna go for crossed fingers. It's a little more detailed than an open hand or a closed fist, but I think we can make it work. It says to mix for 90 seconds. I'm trying to go slowly and gently to not put in a lot of air, but I'm also trying to break up any bigger lumps of the alginate because that's just gonna have a dry pocket in the middle and it won't mold well. There are lots of brands of this alginate. You can buy all sorts of kinds online. Maybe you've got a local store that carries it. I'm using the brand that I am because it is one that I can buy locally at a couple of different craft stores. Every kind I've used has worked pretty much the same way and equally well. Okay, I think that's pretty well mixed. I've got no more large lumps in there. Let's see how much of it we can pour off into this container. And now my hand is gonna go in. I'm gonna try and hold it in the same pose without too much moving around for about 5 minutes until this sets all the way. Looking at it, I'm wishing I had made just a little bit more alginate, that is.
5 minutes later.
All right, we're getting close. You can see that it's started to set. Not quite, gonna give it a little bit more time, but looking good. All right, at this point the alginate has set, and the task is to get my hand out without destroying the alginate. And it's fairly fragile. You can see it does hold itself together, but it's not terribly strong. So, getting my hand out, I'm gonna try wiggling, moving around. The alginate, by its very nature, is kind of wet, so it does, add a little bit of slipperiness. But if you remember, my hand is in this position. That's a lot to get out. We'll see what works. Trying to sort of force air down in to separate around my fingers. It is working. Like just this gentle wiggling, I can feel the alginate separating farther and farther down my hand. The question is, how well will it get to like the tips of my fingers like that? Good movement, good movement. Oh, most of it's free. Here we go. Okay. Managed to get it out. So basically what I was doing the whole time is I would just wiggle lower and lower, and it is, it's spongy, it's compressible, so I can kind of push into one side to pull away from the other, and then once it's released, it doesn't like adhere again. So once you've broken the seal, it works. So you just kind of keep moving, wiggling around until everything seems like it's no longer stuck, and then my hand was able to just sort of slide out. So now, to cast the hand, we are using, this is made by the same company. This one, the other one's Perfect Mold, this one's Perfect Cast. There are lots of varieties of this. This is a casting plaster. Now this one specifically, you can see on the package, this is not regular plaster of Paris. They've added something to it to make it stronger. And that's why we're using this. There are stronger versions of this powder out there. If you need something really strong, you can find that too. This is like a stronger than plaster of Paris, but it's not the most durable stuff in the world. Vibration helps bubbles come up out of the liquid. I'm gonna do it before I pour and then again after I pour. Okay, here we go, making my hand. As always, a huge thank you shout out to all of my supporters on Patreon. If you're interested in joining that, the link is down in the description. That turned out to be a really good quantity, so if anyone is trying to do a hand cast at home, with my hand it was about 3 cups of the plaster mix and 1 cup of water. Now we leave that for about 45 minutes and come remove the plaster from the alginate.
2 hours later.
All right, it's been about 45 minutes. We're gonna see if we can successfully demold my hand. Like I think I said before, alginate is not a multiple use mold material, so I'm going to destroy it, getting it off of the plaster hand. Gross. So here we go, we've got just my fingers showing up, and now we just go tearing apart the alginate mold until we reveal the hand inside it. I have done alginate molds in which I managed to use them a couple of times. I think 2 is my maximum I've ever made. They just don't hold together well, as you can see by how I'm just shredding it to pieces. They're also not great for all kinds of casting. They're really, really good for casting plaster because of the amount of moisture they have in them and stuff like that. They're not so great for things like resin, where the water would probably ruin the whole casting. And because I have my hand in that position, there is sort of a plug of the alginate inside that's a little bit trapped. I just have to dig that all out. But so far, I am very happy with how this casting has turned out. This looks great. It's got crazy high levels of detail. Like, you can almost see my fingerprints, and maybe you could have if I had just let it cure in there more till it really got all the way hard. I've got a couple of spots that were bubbles in the alginate. You can see this little bump on my palm. That is now just cast in plaster because there was a bubble, a gap in the alginate. But I'm gonna let this cure for 24 hours as well as do some cleanup on it, and we'll take a closer look at it. It's solid now, but it's not all the way cured, and it's definitely nowhere near full strength. So we're just gonna let that get to full strength, but while it is curing, I do have a second one I'm going to make now, which is going to become the useful actual aspect of my studio. That'll be permanently installed. So the hook that I'm trying to make, I'm going to have shaped about like this. In the casting process, I'm just gonna put my hand in that direction and keep this right here as an angle that I think I can hold for a few minutes while it cures.
1 hour later.
Whew. Somehow, even though it was a more open hand, I think that one held on better. I want this hand to be pretty strong, so I'm actually gonna do a couple of things to reinforce it. One, I am going to add some fiberglass into the plaster. That's gonna get all mixed in there, and that should help make it stronger. In addition to that, I'm going to have a couple of pieces of all thread that I just sort of set down in there so that anything resting on the fingers, the weight of it will get transferred back and it'll really give some structural support. Along with that, I have this eye bolt that I'm going to position inside the plaster so that the threads are sticking out, so I can actually thread the whole hand into a board when I'm ready to use it to hang something up. Okay, another 45 minutes. We can demold that one.
2 hours later.
Okay. This one, of course, because of the hardware, is not going to stand up nicely that direction. So we're just gonna put it like this and use a popsicle stick as a sort of knife. Oof, we did get quite a bit more bubbling this time, but that shouldn't affect the functionality of it. Once again, quite warm. Look at that detail. That looks just like my hand. You can actually see the rebar sticking out in this one little spot, the all thread. It's not rebar, but I'm using it as rebar. And I believe that actually overlaps with the length of our hardware. So that should be pretty sturdy. Oh, there it is. There it is coming out the fingertips as well. Once this is cured all the way, I'll probably file that down just a little bit. A little red paint that was on the end of the all thread. Let's give that 24 hours to cure all the way, and then we'll do all our cleanup. I let these cure and harden overnight, and I gotta say, they are looking great. I did a little bit of cleanup, taking off some of those little bubble spots. Everything's looking good. On this hand, there are quite a few bubbles on the surface, and if this was going to be a display piece, I could mix up a little more plaster and fill those in, or even just use some spackle, but this is going to be functional. It's not really going to be seen. That's going to be a hook up in the air. I'm happy with it. I'm going to leave it how it is, and I think it's definitely strong enough for what I want it to do. One modification I am going to make. This is going to be in sort of that position on the wall, and it's going to be hanging by the visor, and since I don't want to scratch up the inside of the visor, I'm going to take a little bit of this Model Magic, which is, people call it marshmallow clay. It's very light and fluffy, and I'm just going to make a sheet of that that fits over part of the fingertips, so that if the mask is resting on it, it's less likely to scratch it. I gotta let that clay dry a bit. While it's drying, let's get everything else set up on the wall. I've got this board screwed into the wall, and we're going to end up screwing the hand into this board. Extra support. Down here, I've got a little shelf, and that's where the part that goes around your waist is just gonna sit. I don't want it to just sit because then it'll fall off, so I'm also gonna use a magnet to hold it in place. I'm just gonna be using a cell phone mount. This is the kind of thing, this goes on the back of your phone, and this goes wherever and holds it in place. So I'm going to attach this right here, and the plate is going to go on the back of our VersaFlow. Oh, that's fantastic. I love it. I just line up with it. Did I hit it? Oh, I did. I got it. The foam's all dry. It's time to install this in the wall and see how well it works as a hook. It does look a little odd, just a hand sort of sticking out from the wall. Let's give this thing a test. So I got to get used to this, haven't done it yet. Where's the hand? Okay, so it just needs to come off and it rests like that. And this just attaches with the magnet. That was fantastic. Put it on. Oh my gosh, that's so much better. Putting this on from sitting on a counter is always very obnoxious. Putting it on from the wall is great. That is an absolute win. Fantastic. Hallelujah. Look at that. Holding it all nice. That's great. This was a lot of fun. Works great. Subscribe for more cool stuff.